I'm Garth Forster, pastor here at First Baptist Church in Barnesville, and we're taking a look at our living room session together. This is Greg Burrell, of course, our minister of music for the last 36 years, and just a very well-known name here in the Barnesville and larger Lamar County community. So we appreciate Greg so very much. Wear those sunglasses. There you go. We appreciate Greg so very much. We are getting used to this coronavirus thing. This is week number 11 of the coronavirus, and we're trying to learn how to deal with it. We're all hoping for an old normal. At least we come back to some of the old normal.
Yeah.
But for right now, we understand this is the way it is, and so we're living with it. We're venturing out more, of course. I took a little trip up to see some friends of mine up in Cartersville. Suzanne and I did this weekend.
You saw Joe?
Squirrely Joe, yeah. Joe with.
Joe's awesome.
I hope he doesn't watch this, but anyway, we had a good visit with Joe and Carol, and we are now, of course, still dealing with how we're doing things. Ate out at and there were very few people there. Ate at Cracker Barrel up there on the Highway 20 near Cartersville, and kind of nice to get out and not be real crowded in places, but that's all a risk. We all understand that. It's all a risk that we're taking. Some of the risks are bigger than others, but we want you to stay home if you don't feel safe. We've said that over and over again, and I hope you'll do that. We talked this past Sunday about family finances, the idea that is in a part of how we look at our families. If we don't handle finances well, that can be a huge problem in terms of a family's well-being and their future and everything else. And I talked about the Great Depression, that at that time things were going very, very well. Just before the Great Depression, prices were higher, people were making more money than they'd ever made before in the stock market. Then all of a sudden it crashes in 1929, and all those prognosticators who had said that we were in for a permanent high in terms of the financial markets, of course, became fools, and the economy tanked, and we were in big, big trouble. And Paul wrote this to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6:17. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty. Is it possible for rich folks to be haughty and proud? Certainly, and what they're haughty about is their money. So don't let them be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. The Bible says, same letter, Paul says to Timothy, for the love of money is a way that evil comes into our world, and that's certainly possible for us. We've got to be careful. Money is something that should be a tool to us, not an end in itself. So, Paul talks to Timothy about that, and the love of money being a source of all kinds of evil. But I talked about 8 principles in this message. And first of all was the ownership principle, the idea that God owns it all and not us. God owns it all, and we're just borrowing it for a little while. That wonderful Psalm 24, verse 1, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. And I mentioned, I don't know if you were this way, Greg, but I mentioned that when I was a teenager, I didn't own a car. Times were a little bit different back then. Not every teenager had to have a car. My parents at least believed that. So none of us 4 kids had a car when we were teenagers. So.
I had an old clunker,
Yeah.
It was a hand-me-down.
Right.
And, but, that does.
Kind of like our trucks right now.
Yeah, exactly.
We've still got clunkers.
It works, it's worked for me all these years.
It's hard rising in this world, isn't it? But anyway,
Yes,
we've still got clunkers. But I knew the car wasn't mine. I could use it when I asked permission from my father to use it, and then, of course, as soon as I was done with it, I had to get it back to him. And anytime he didn't want me to use it, I couldn't use it. It wasn't my car. And that's the way we need to look at riches or money or possessions in this world, is they're not really ours. We're just borrowing them for a little while. And there's a freedom that comes with that. There's a great freedom that comes with that concept that I'm no longer going to be enslaved to things or spend all my life trying to get what I want materially, because I know that I can't hold on to it anyway. Yeah. And it just the uncertainty of riches. You can be wealthy one day and impoverished the next. You can have everything that you thought was going to make you happy one day, and by that afternoon you found out that it didn't make you happy at all. So the uncertainty of riches, the ownership principle, God owns it all, the stewardship principle is what I looked at secondly. And Greg, I know that we all understand the idea that what we have in life physically, as well as talents, skills, abilities, things of that nature, those are all given to us by God, not to use for ourselves, but to use for His kingdom. And by using them for His kingdom, then we, of course, are using them well. That parable of the talents, it's a long one to read in a sermon, so I normally tell it, I don't read it, which is what I did Sunday. I told it, but that parable talks about the idea that everything that we have, God intends for us to use for His glory. Are there some stories in your life that really have resonated with that?
I mean, that's our everyday life. We get up and the talents, the spiritual gifts, all of these things are the things that God wants us to put to use for His glory, as well as money. Here we are talking about finances, and as you've been talking, I've been thinking, money is just a fantastic way to bring blessing into someone's life. There are so many different charities. There's so many different individuals, and so often money can be such a blessing, and people will be grateful to you. Not that that's why you did it, but grateful to you for the rest of their lives, because at a time when they couldn't afford to do something, you helped them to do that. So that's what I think of, and of course. One preacher I remember talking about the parable of the talents said, we kind of feel these days that when we're going to get to heaven, rather than looking at us and calling us to account for what He gave us, that Jesus is going to say, oh, none of that mattered. No, don't worry about that. You just go on, It does matter,
yeah, it does.
Okay? He called those people before Him and said, how did it go?
Yeah.
What did you earn?
That's right.
And we're all going to have to answer for that. So it's important to use
Absolutely.
whatever it is God's given you.
And what you said about the giving part, that just resonates with the idea of what Jesus said. It's more blessed to give than it is to receive. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. There's a different kind of high that comes when you give than there is when you receive. You go out and buy yourself something that you've wanted for a while. Yeah, there's a high that comes with that, but it doesn't last very long, Especially if somebody wrecks that new car. It doesn't last very long.
I do have a story there, but go ahead.
But there's a totally different kind of high that's a lasting type of enjoyment, or maybe just joy, that comes when you give to somebody else, and particularly when you give to meet a need. And I think Jesus obviously knew about that, and that's why I could say it's more blessed to give. You'll be more blessed. You'll feel more blessed.
Oh yeah.
When you give than you will when you receive.
And that's something that doesn't end. You can go around for the rest of your life feeling good about that. There was a need there. I helped.
Yeah.
I made a difference in this person's life.
Absolutely. And it's really perhaps it's a similar thought to think about the people that made a lot of money. They had a lot of things. They had a lot of money. And an awful lot of those people you see, as they get a little bit older, they begin to recognize, number one, I can't take it with me. Number two, I don't need to use it all for myself. We've known people like that, and we've admired people like that who've said, I'm going to start blessing others. I'm going to start helping others. And that's just another part of that stewardship. It's the idea that this isn't mine to hoard. This isn't mine to do with what I will. This is the Lord's, and He's let me borrow it for a while, and He's wondering how I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
If I use it selfishly, then I'm a big loser in the end.
Yeah.
If I use it for other people, then I'll be blessed, and so will those people be blessed.
And if you're like me, if you have real world finances, there are times in your life where you don't have extra money to give away. And then in those years when you do, it's real easy to be kind of stingy with it because you remember the times when you didn't. So in those good years, remember to let it go, remember to help somebody with that.
Absolutely. I talk about the industrial principle, and I kind of like that name.
Yes.
It's the idea that, you're not going to be given most of the stuff in your life. You're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to work for it. And I used, of course, the scripture out of 2 Thessalonians chapter 7, I think it is, or chapter 3 rather, verse 10, that talks about if a person will not work, they shall not eat. Talked about William Bradbury, first governor of Plymouth Colony, who basically had those words placarded on the church door there, so that they would understand that this isn't going to be the way it's been in failed colonies in America. You're not going to be able to lay back and live off somebody else. You're going to have to, if you want to eat, you're going to have to work.
Yes.
And he made a success of the colony that way, and how important it is for us to teach our children about that.
Parents, listen up. You ready? If I had one thing that I could change in the way I raise my kids, I would ban allowances from my house. And when my kids came to me for money, I would say, what have you done for me lately? They need to learn that they have to earn. And you can be generous with what you pay them for the things that they do around the house. You don't have to be stingy about it. You don't have to use this as a way to be constantly punishing your kids. You can be generous, but everything has to be earned. Think about that. I think allowances are of Satan. Make them earn it.
Greg Burrell's new book, Learn to Earn.
There you go. You like that?
I like that. That'll work. That'll work. It's simply the idea that at an early age you start them off, and you don't have to worry about the labor laws or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I was working by the time I was 14 or 15 years old. I didn't work all day, and I didn't work every day, but I worked a little bit in a shop helping someone do something, a very simple task. But it taught me early on, between that and cutting people's grass and things like that, it taught me early on that this is the way I'm going to make it in this world. I'm going to have to earn the money that I make. And that's very, very important. The accounting principle, that's probably the most important principle that we look at, because it has to do with budget. And Greg, I know that at one time you had the envelope system as the way that and I've always admired that. Explain to them what the envelope system, for our younger folks who've never heard of the envelope system, explain to them what that is.
If you are this badly strapped, here's how you do that. You go to the bank and you get a bunch of those little banking envelopes, okay? And you take them home. You've got your budget, and you write on those envelopes, this is grocery, this is gasoline, this is, whatever. And you actually physically put the money in those envelopes, and then you spend it throughout the month, and if perchance you are fortunate enough to have any left over, you can recycle that money into an area that you know is going to need more next month or whatever. But entertainment, things, especially the expendable things, the things that are kind of flexible, you want to make sure you toe kind of a hard line on that, because if you don't, you'll be, meals out and entertainment, that's endless. We just keep spending and keep spending, and you don't want that to happen. So yeah, it kind of helps you toe the line.
Yeah. It's the idea that a budget helps you discern between what you need and what you just want. And we can't, most of us aren't able to fund all of our wants.
No.
Because our wants are endless. They never end. So we have to learn how to live with what we need and budget for what we need. And that's what a budget is all about. People don't like the word budget. They think it's like the word diet. They don't like that word either.
Yeah.
But I don't like it. But anyway, the bottom line is you've got to be able to discern between what you just want and what you really need. The budget has to go for the things you need. And then you budget well enough, you'll be able to afford a few of your wants.
Are you thinking about the United States budget right now? That's why we're in this mess. Yeah. Be better than the government. Only spend the money you actually own. Go ahead.
And speaking of indebtedness, fifthly, we talked about the indebtedness principle, the idea that you've got to be very careful getting into debt, because it can become a trap. And everybody's heard the expression, the debt trap. A trap is alluring. A trap is something that's it looks desirable to us, but the other two aspects of it are it's very easy to get into, very hard to get back out of. And lately I've been dealing with a rat trap under my house. Now I don't think I got the rat. I think he moved out when he heard I was going to bring the trap in. But anyway, this thing is not like a mouse trap. You better watch your fingers setting this thing up, all right? You knock your fingers off.
I think I know the kind you're talking about.
Yeah, it really will. And that's just, you talk about hard to get back out of, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Even for me, it was hard to get back out of. But anyway, you know, the indebtedness idea is that, as the commercial likes to say, they never said the second half of that commercial, by the way. You can have it now. The second half was, and pay for it forever.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, you can have it now, but you're going to pay for it for a long, long time to come. And that's what most people won't quite get. It takes some discipline to avoid getting yourself in that kind of a situation. Of course, I use the idea of Thomas Jefferson, who is, you know, just an ingenious, great American in so many ways, but boy, was he a failure when it came to debt. And we've just seen he didn't have credit cards back then. He still was a failure when it came to debt, you know. So the bottom line, it becomes the kind of thing that you just have to watch out for because it can get you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all of us have had a little experience with that, but it's you know, it's one of the things that I talk about in pre-marriage counseling is be careful with debt because it can ruin a marriage. Is that, you know, it's ruined lots and lots of marriages over the years.
It sure has.
Sixthly, we talk about the protection principle. A simple idea. You set some money aside for the unexpected expenses of life. And we've all had our share of unexpected expenses of life. We all thought, you know, our money was going to go to a certain area and was going to go a certain way, and then all of a sudden something happened. The dishwasher broke down, or worse yet, the washing machine broke down. There was a leak in the roof. You know, there was this, there was that. The car got wrecked, and I have to pay the deductible, that kind of thing. All of those kinds of things happen. We never expect them to happen, but they're going to happen. Those are the certain uncertainties.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We don't know which one it will be, but it will be one of them. I promise.
Sure.
You know. So
Sure.
we have to learn to budget for those kinds of things as well. Put some money aside for them. Seventhly, I talked about the preservation principle. Mentioned our good friend. As I talked about that, so important, Bruce Wilson, that you know, quotes me word for word.
We love you, Bruce.
We love you, Bruce. Sorry I didn't ask you about using your name, but you know, he quotes me word for word, and you know, it actually makes preachers feel good when people come back years later and say, you said this one time, and you know, it really does, because it means that hopefully you've had a little bit of influence in people's lives. But the bottom line is that we have to understand that, you know, if we want our dreams to come true, you got to start financing them. You got to start saving for them. They're not going to happen if you spend all your money on what you want right now. And somebody gave a great definition of maturity one time when they said that maturity is the ability to put off short-term wants for long-term dreams.
Yeah.
The ability to put off short-term wants for long-term dreams. And that's what maturity is really all about. It's the idea that, hey, I've got something that I've really dreamed of all my life, and I want to be able to accomplish that, but I'm going to have to be disciplined to accomplish that. It's not going to just happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And lastly, we talk about the discipleship principle. You know, Greg, I know that we've all had to deal with that in our lives as we think about Christian discipleship and money. Sometimes we like to separate those two.
Yeah.
But when we talk about those two ideas, one of the things we have to remember is that's a part of our discipleship. That's a part of our discipleship, and all of us have struggled with it. You know, I know that in the early years, particularly you first get married, and you start thinking about where is that 10% for God going to come from? You know, how am I going to get that? You know, how I don't have that left over. And you have to manage your money in order to be able to do that. But it's such a good discipline, and it pays such wonderful dividends for all the years that are later.
Count on the blessing of God.
Yeah.
You know, just count on that.
And God has promised that. You know, we got to be careful. I've said to people, you know, God doesn't promise to bless you in many places in the Scripture, but in that Malachi passage where He talks about tithing, He says, "Hey, test me now." You're not supposed to test God in many ways, but He says, test me. I will pour you out such a blessing you won't be able to contain it. And that's an idea that we need to understand. We don't give to get, but we give because we want to be obedient and because we love God.
Yes.
And when we give that way, God promises that He's going to bless us.
And my God will supply all of your needs according to his riches in Christ Jesus.
Amen.
Where'd that come from, Pastor?
Philippians 4:19.
Oh, I love this guy. Yes.
All right. I was supposed to know that. I found that out in seminary. But anyway, we've we had a great time with you today. Greg, thank you, man. It's
Of
always
course.
been
Happy to
good
be
time,
here.
joy to sit down with you and talk like this. Thank you for hanging in there with us. We are, of course, looking at the idea of drive-in services this coming Sunday. That will be on the 31st, and we'll be sharing with you more information about that and other postings. So please keep your eyes and ears open, and we'll be sharing more about that real soon. Thank you for coming together with us online.